The Detroit Lions Hendon Hooker situation is one of the most interesting storylines and interesting narratives that the Detroit Lions have going on right now. The former 69th overall selection from the University of Tennessee was looked at in the class as one of the most explosive, efficient, and dangerous quarterbacks to be coming out of the 2023 NFL Draft, being a former Heisman finalist and likely a Heisman favorite had he not suffered a late season-ending knee injury against South Carolina. But now, with the major updates with the Detroit Lions and the newest signings of contracts, Hendon Hooker's future seems to be up in the air, and a lot of people aren't quite sure what the future holds for their former third round selection. However, before we get into taking a look at Hendon Hooker's future, let's take a look at where Hendon Hooker came from. As with the Tennessee Volunteers, he was, as I said, one of the most dynamic and explosive passers in all of college football, leading Tennessee to an upset win over Alabama, to one of the best passing attacks in all of college football, a potential playoff berth before his injury, and as well as being a Heisman favorite. Over his 2 seasons at Tennessee, Hendon Hooker passed for over 6,000 yards and 58 touchdowns through the air before adding on over 1,000 yards on the ground and 10 touchdowns with his legs. All in all, Hendon Hooker had a 2-year career as a Volunteer, putting up over 7,000 yards and 68 touchdowns. As I said, one of the most dynamic, explosive, and dangerous quarterbacks in the college football ranks, and some people had Hendon Hooker ranked as high as the #1 quarterback in the 2023 NFL Draft. But due to his age and due to his injury, he ended up falling to the 69th overall selection, where the Detroit Lions decided to trade up and select the former Tennessee Volunteer. Now, obviously, everything kind of had a wrench thrown in their plans when Jared Goff signed a 4-year, $212 million contract, making him the highest paid quarterback in NFL history behind one and only Joe Burrow. Jared Goff is the second highest paid quarterback in all of football history, and it's well deserved. Jared Goff last year was second in the NFL in passing yards. Nobody since 2017 has passed for more passing yards than Jared Goff through the air. He's been a great quarterback for the Detroit Lions, and after bringing them their first 2 playoff wins since 1991 and taking them to their first NFC Championship game in over 3 decades, there is no question about whether or not Jared Goff deserves a contract, right? His contract goes through 2027 to 2028, which would put him between 34 and 35 years old. Now, the contract officially goes through 2028, but if they want to cut Jared Goff in that 2028 season, they would save roughly $47 million of cap while facing just over $11 million of dead cap space. So with all of the massive contracts coming up, there is a chance that Jared Goff in the 2028 season is moved on from in terms for a younger and a cheaper option, as Jared Goff will be exiting his physical prime, will likely not be the same quarterback that he was this season or last season. And there's a good chance that come the end of that contract, Jared Goff potentially retires or finds another home in the NFL. But in 2027, Hendon Hooker potentially won't be on the rosters. Hendon Hooker's rookie deal goes through 2026, meaning the Lions get a very, very long and extensive look at Hendon Hooker as a backup quarterback, as a player in practice, and as a player as whether or not they want to keep around. Now, I think that Hendon Hooker's value right now is a backup quarterback. I do not think that Hendon Hooker is going to be pushing Jared Goff out the door anytime soon. And I would be shocked if outside of injuries, of course, Hendon Hooker starts even a single game for the Detroit Lions over the next 3 to 4 seasons. And I would be shocked if Hendon Hooker played a game on his rookie contract. Again, barring injuries where Hendon Hooker very well could potentially be a guy that shows out with injury concerns and stuff like that. If Jared Goff is to go down, Hendon Hooker will obviously start. But other than that, I really don't think Hendon Hooker is going to be that player. I think his role on the team right now is to be a quality backup, be one of the better backups in the NFL, and be ready in case Jared Goff does go down. And Hendon Hooker has to take the reins for a large portion, if not the remaining of an entire NFL season. But Where does that put Hendon Hooker at the end of his contract? Through 2026, Hendon Hooker will be 28 years old, meaning he will have enough time to sign a second contract. And if the second contract is a 4-year deal, that will put him from a 29 to 33-year-old, which coincidentally is the exact same time frame that Jared Goff is now playing his 4-year contract under. Jared Goff is playing his 29-year-old season next year and will be playing through 33, 34, or 35, depending on when the Lions decide to move on from the remaining of his contract. So it's not as though Hendon Hooker will be too old to sign a second contract the next time around. And personally, I think that Hendon Hooker could be just a very drawn out and a very long-term developmental project in a very similar way to how the Green Bay Packers developed Jordan Love, how the Green Bay Packers developed Aaron Rodgers, but obviously over a much larger scale and over a much larger sample size, as you'd have about 4 to 5 years to see what Hendon Hooker has and about 2 to 3 years to see what Aaron Rodgers and Jordan Love had, respectively. However, if Hendon Hooker is 28, if he signs a 4-year contract for, let's be realistic, not very much money for a second deal, but he could be the future quarterback at that point. Hendon Hooker would not have a ton of market value, never being a starting quarterback before, but the Lions would know his worth. The Lions could get him well below starting quarterback value, knowing he could be a potential starting quality quarterback in the NFL. And to that point, that could be then 4 more years of Hendon Hooker from 29, 30, 31, 32. And you could see a really strong 4 to 5 year starting career from Hendon Hooker. Now, despite this not being the most common, I guess, path that most NFL teams take, this is not something that has not been done before and something that cannot be done in the future. Taking a look at some of the players that have sat for a long time and didn't get their starts until their mid to late 20s, Kurt Warner did not start an NFL game until 1999, I believe, at the age of 28. Right? Tony Romo didn't start an NFL game till the age of 26 in his 3rd year as a pro. He spent 3 years as a backup. Geno Smith didn't play football from ages 25 to 31, or at least did not start a game until he was 31 years old before he started a week 1 matchup, not as a backup quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo did not start a game until he's 28 years old, or again, did not play as a starter until his 28-year-old season. And then, of course, you have Jordan Love, who sat for 2 years, Aaron Rodgers, who sat for 3 years, and they're both looking like all-pro, Pro Bowl caliber quarterbacks. Obviously, Aaron Rodgers being one of the best ever, and Jordan Love looking to be one of the better young NFC quarterbacks in the conference right now. So it's not unheard of for a player to take a long time to get their first start. And yes, Kurt Warner is a one-off story, right? Hall of Famer that started at 28. That doesn't happen very often. Jimmy Garoppolo did not win a Super Bowl, wasn't quite able to lead his team, but did go to a Super Bowl. Geno Smith led his team to the playoffs. Tony Romo led his team to the playoffs several times over. And all 4 of these quarterbacks, and even if you want to say Love and Rodgers, all 6 of these quarterbacks have taken their team to playoff berth, and 3 of the 6 have taken their teams to a Super Bowl. So Hendon Hooker starting his career at 28, starting his playing career essentially at 29 years old might seem like something that is really unlikely to happen, but it's not something that we haven't seen in the past. And especially nowadays with quarterbacks playing into their mid to late 30s, if not early 40s, Hendon Hooker starting at 29 could still have a 10-year NFL career ahead of him, right? Aaron Rodgers is 40. Joe Flacco is 38. Kirk Cousins and Matthew Stafford are 35. And Russell Wilson, a player that I think that Hendon Hooker compares really, really well to, is also still playing at 35, is now the starting quarterback for the Pittsburgh Steelers this year after a couple rough years in Denver. But going back to Russ's 29-year-old season, he was an MVP candidate, an all-pro candidate, and potentially one of the best quarterbacks in the entirety of the NFL. So although Hendon Hooker's future as of right now does seem a little bleak, obviously will not be the starting quarterback for quite a few years, as we look down the line, as Aiden Hutchinson gets a new contract, as Aleem McNeil gets a new contract, as Ifeatu Melifonwu and Derek Barnes and Malcolm Rodriguez and Terrion Arnold and Brian Branch and Sam Laporta and X, Y, and Z players, Jahmyr Gibbs and Jamison Williams, and all of these young stars that the Detroit Lions have on their roster, as they get second and third expensive big contracts, it'll be really nice to not have to pay a quarterback 50-60 million dollars by the time that comes around, whereas you could potentially pay Hendon Hooker $20 million, well below the average quarterback salary at that point, because he's not going to have a market. But the Lions, Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell and the offensive coordinator at the time are going to know exactly what Hendon Hooker is, exactly who Hendon Hooker is, and they're going to know whether or not he is worthy of a second contract. And if it is, nobody's going to offer him more than $20 million a season to come be a backup, but the Lions could potentially pay him well below market value to be a 3 to 4 year starter. So with all of that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below how you feel about the future of Hendon Hooker. I do think that it is potentially a slim shot that he becomes a franchise quarterback, but I don't think the odds are zero. I don't think Hendon Hooker's career is over at all. I don't think you spend a top 70 pick on a quarterback to not have any intentions of playing him in the future. And even though he's an older quarterback, even though he is an older prospect, 28, 29 is not super old for a quarterback, especially a quarterback that has the quick release that Hendon Hooker has, that has the arm talent that Hendon Hooker has, that has the ability and the playmaking ability that Hendon Hooker displays. Even guys like Russell Wilson played at a high level into their early 30s, meaning you could have Hendon Hooker on a super cheap deal playing at a high level for at minimum 3 to 4 seasons as your starting quarterback. So that being said, that is kind of my opinion on Hendon Hooker right now. I think as the contracts get more expensive, as you pay the rest of the roster, it would be really convenient to have a younger, better quarterback as far as contract value wise goes, as opposed to potentially paying Jared Goff another 3 to 4 year contract going into age 40. Hendon Hooker could be the long-term option after Jared Goff's contract expires. With all of that being said, that is all I have for you guys today. Let me know down in the comments below how you feel about this contract, what you think about Hendon Hooker's future. Be very curious what you guys have to say and what you guys think. But with all of that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Thank you all so much for watching, and until next time, and as always, go live.